Hello, everybody. We're live here with Indrani. She is,
Hello.
hi, Indrani. Indrani is a Tribeca Film Festival 2019 award winning director, photographer, and activist, empowering diversity, women, LGBTQIA community, and environmental sustainability. Indrani, would you share your thoughts with us on the work that you do and women's empowerment?
Thanks so much. I'm honored to be here with you today. I've worked for the past 20 years on women's empowerment and empowerment of diversity and people at risk of domestic violence. I believe that there is so much untapped human potential that is being wasted, and that is all around the world. You have half of the population that is not being heard as much as the other half. And so a lot of the work that I've been doing has been to give voice to those who are not often heard, both in the films that I direct, in the photography that I do, and in my social justice advocacy work. I'm currently a visiting lecturer at Princeton University, and I'm teaching a course called Moving Millions to Action with Film and Art for Social Justice and Human Rights. And it's a very exciting time to be teaching this subject. It's what I'm very passionate about, and finding so many students who are not only passionate, but really well-informed and really powerful in their visions of making a better world. And so I'm thrilled to help provide tools for them from my experience. And when I was a teenager, well, I grew up in India. I was born there. And as a small child, I worked with Mother Teresa. I helped my mother with translating because she was English and she didn't speak Bengali. My father's Bengali from India, so I spoke fluently and I could help her to communicate. So I got to spend a lot of time with Mother Teresa from a very young age, and to really see the power that a very small woman can have to create change and to uplift the people around her. When I was a teenager, I left India, I became a model, and I traveled around the world, and I became an actress as well. And I did both of those because I really wanted to learn how to use film and photography for creating the kind of change that I wanted to see in the world. And I made lots of money as a model, and I went back to India and I started a school there called Shakti Empowerment Education. I co-founded it with my father. It's cschool.org if you want to check it out. And it's really been the joy of my life. 300 children annually, as well as women for whom we provide vocational training and women's empowerment training, as well as literacy. And we also do microfinancing. We provide small loans to women who've completed the course. And it's been extraordinary to see how those women with just a little bit of support and just a very tiny amount of resources can do incredible work and can transform their lives and the lives of those around them. So that has been a wonderful learning experience, from seeing people who didn't have enough to feed their own kids within a few months transform themselves into creators of industry around them and being able to hire others to work with them. It's been really phenomenal and really inspiring. So the way I see the world, there are so many incredible people who have really fascinating stories and unbelievable abilities that are untapped. If we simply provide resources and skills for as many women as possible, we will change all of the ways that the world works. And women generally have a greater sense of responsibility for their families. It's been proven that when resources are given to women, they tend to spend them on healthcare, on education, and on what's best for their families. And so my goal is to just help these women to do what they would naturally do if they had access to some of the resources that the rest of us take for granted. Part of my work with cschool.org has been learning from the students, and that's been extremely rewarding because I've come to realize that nonprofits, I've worked with many nonprofits, and many of them go into situations without really understanding the problems that the people face. And so by listening and being respectful and letting them guide us, we can learn so much more about ways to help them to make the change they need in their lives, which ultimately is for the good of everyone. Now, this past year has been such a turbulent time for many people, with COVID, with Black Lives Matter, with the Me Too movements. And I think it's a really positive time in many ways because people have stopped and looked at their lives and looked at those around them and recognized that we can't continue to ignore the needs of others and hope that everything's just going to be okay. We have to take responsibility. And especially if we're in positions of power or positions of where we have abundance, we have an obligation and a responsibility to share with those who lack those items. Same thing goes for knowledge and education. I think the most valuable thing that one can do with one's time is to share one's knowledge with others. And I think that people often feel helpless in these times of change. They're looking for someone else to solve the problems, but ultimately it's up to each of us to step up and use the resources that we have at hand to make things better and to empower others who can do even more good work. So I think that one of the most exciting aspects of being a filmmaker is the ability to really create a new world. We imagine the future and we help everyone else in society to share in these imaginations. I like to think of artists and filmmakers as the myth makers of our time. I think that the collective imagination of the world is shaped very much by film and media. And so we have an enormous power and also a huge responsibility to use that access, that ability to create the possibilities of the future, and to use that responsibly, and to think about how we can enlarge our footprints in a positive way. We talk a lot about reducing our footprints when it comes to sustainability, but each of us creates a legacy in the world. And as we make choices of what to watch, what to buy, how to live, whom to care for, we shape the world around us. And we're very fortunate now to have more and more female filmmakers and filmmakers of color creating new narratives, exploring new possibilities. And I think that the experiences that people of diversity bring to everyone are extremely profound because they are finding new ways of dealing with the old challenges. So I think it's important not only for women to watch content created by women, and not only for people of color to support people of color who are making films and media, but for everyone to learn from each other, to deliberately seek out experiences that are different from those that we're used to, and perspectives that can give us new ways of seeing the world. I'm thrilled to be here as part of the Indigenous panel as well. And this summit is very exciting because bringing together Indigenous voices from around the world, I think, is incredibly powerful. And there is so much wisdom and shared ways of seeing the world that are different from the norms of what we're used to seeing represented in film and media. So I encourage each of you to really take advantage of this opportunity to learn from those that you haven't perhaps heard as much from, or perspectives that you haven't explored yet. And or if you have, if it's something that's familiar to you, then to go much deeper and to engage really in these wonderful conversations that are being had about how we can make the world livable again, how we can share resources, how we can live in harmony with each other and with nature. And in so many ways that we need to learn and grow as survive on this planet that is so beautiful and has given us so much. I think that we have some other guests that were supposed to be joining today, and I think they may be joining a little later. I'm thrilled to be here with you today, and I believe that there is nothing more transformative or more exciting than being able to have conversations with people that have different perspectives, and to bring women together and to bring together people of diversity of all kinds, so that we can enrich and strengthen our abilities to make the change we need in the world.
Thank you so much for sharing your words of wisdom, and it's a blessing seeing the scenery behind you and also what difference you've made.
Thank you so much. Really a great honor to be here today.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Gail. I had a question for you about filmmaking.
Sure.
So, in terms of your filmmaking, what moves your soul with your filmmaking? What moves your soul? What lens are you looking through?
That's a lovely question. For me, it's all about transformation. I am moved when I see stories, when I feel and I get to experience people transforming. And I think that I started out as a photographer, and then I became a filmmaker, because that process of transformation is so extraordinary. And it is something that, as you see others transforming, it inspires you to create your own transformation and to be the architect of the changes that you want to see in your own life. So that's what makes me very excited. I'm also really inspired by seeing and hearing voices that are not as often heard, the voices who have been silenced or have been ignored. And I find that the perspectives that people bring who have lived through or survived different kinds of suffering are incredibly empowering and incredibly wise. And I think there's so much to learn from those who have overcome major challenges.
You know, it's funny. We do a lot of work around voices, especially women's voices. And I remember there was a woman in Zimbabwe, and her mother is on a high echelon with some of the countries. Okay. And what was quite interesting was that they came to a conference, and they left. And when they left, we just interviewed the young woman on, because we're not media. It was just something in the moment, and we interviewed her on mental health and body positivity. And so no one knew that when she got home, she would be accused of inciting women against men in Zimbabwe. Something that we may think is far-fetched here, but you never know what can happen.
Right.
Anyway, long story short, they put her in a jail, but they had nothing against her. They took her computer, her passport, and everything. We had this interview. We could have ran it then, but we knew that it wouldn't be a good idea because of the relationships with the country. So what we did was we ran it about 4 days later, 4 months later or 6 months later, and had nothing at all to do with what they were trying to place against her. the video was about body positivity. We ran it, and they released her from jail the next morning. And that's the power a story can tell. And I would love to know, what are some of the most powerful stories? It doesn't mean that the film or the video had to be the most perfect thing, but it was a story that told someone else's story through your lens, that they could see themselves in a new way. Can you share with me what that most, and with the world, what was the most powerful story like that you remember that that even inspired you?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I've done a lot of work with women who have overcome domestic violence, and women and men, from war-torn places. I was in Central African Republic, where I filmed a short film against malaria, with the UN. It was called Nothing But Nets. And part of the process of interviewing people there, about their experiences, I went there initially to talk about malaria, but I soon realized that the experiences of being through a war were far more on people's minds than the challenge of malaria, and just seeing how powerful and resilient people are, and how they could be so loving towards others after having experienced such terrible traumas. It was really moving to me, and I really recognize that that we often think that that kind of suffering, that kind of wholesale destruction would make people broken or make them weak. But I think that it's wonderful to see how people can become stronger, even from having survived these terrible situations, and just how fortunate that we all are to have the basic things that we take for granted. That for me has been really, really eye-opening.
Wow. One of the things that is very powerful, one of the things that's very powerful is in a storytelling is people don't realize there are many vantage points in which to see a story. Which vantage point do you often like to tell your story through?
I really enjoy telling stories through a mythological lens. I feel that mythology shapes so much of our understanding of the world, and these stories that have been passed down for thousands of years, from generation to generation, they carry a great deal of weight and a great deal of psychological and social insights and importance. So I've enjoyed bringing stories, for example, an ancient Chinese legend that I brought to New York City, or another story that was a Celtic story of women that turn into seals in water and humans on land. Stories of transformation that are based on fantasy, but that relate to the very real aspects of each of our lives, where each of us has to find our ways to transform, to grow, to overcome visions of ourselves that no longer serve us, and find new strengths. So I find those ancient stories to be extremely inspiring.
You and I have something in common. I love to tell stories about through the lens of what women go through in general, and ending domestic violence. I'm on a task force for that. And what I love about what you're saying, okay, is that you can take the lens and show the woman that was an experience. So transformation is looking at what happened and not adding to it, so that you can actually get over it. Because when you add interpretation, your feelings and your thoughts to it, you perpetuate the situation. And you can actually tell that in a lens through a short video or a film. I would love to know, like, when you can you take us through a journey of when you told a story, okay? And when you told that story, Indrani, you took the woman through where she was to where she could be.
Yes, yeah, I'd love to share that story with you. There's an ancient Asian myth that's been around for hundreds of years, maybe longer. The actual story takes place over 300 years. And what I did in the short film that I created, I condensed that into 10 minutes. But the premise of the story is a snake demoness chooses to become a woman in order to experience human love. And she becomes the most perfect, powerful woman. She heals her community. She's a doctor, a healer. She becomes a perfect wife. She does all the correct things that one would want a wife to do in that society at that time. And yet she is constantly questioned. And there are all these attempts made by others to bring out her former snake self. And so it deals with the idea of redemption and the idea of does society allow you to change, to make the changes you want to make, or does it always hold you in some way to your weakest moments? Do you get judged even when you're doing great things by the mistakes you've made? And so it was a fascinating character and a fascinating journey to bring to life, because it dealt with very real, tangible issues in this fantastical way of her actually turning into a snake demoness as a metaphor for some of the parts of her past that she was trying to let go of. So I thought that was a really interesting way of looking at the process of change and the way in which society tries to hold people back sometimes, and or can get in the way of a full and heroic kind of transformation.
What's interesting in what you said? I've been doing a lot of interviews. I hate the word interviews, conversations all day. And the one thing that's really interesting, Alicia Keys has a song out called "So Done," and I was totally in disagreement with that song, because yes, society. I love what you said about society cannot forgive us for our past mistakes, but I think what has to happen is we have to forgive ourselves for our past mistakes, and then that gets reflected on the outside. It may not happen right away, but that's part of the transformative process in allowing things to move in that way. Is you have to forgive yourself, and often we don't forgive ourselves. We get over it, we heal, but you can get over and heal, but that doesn't mean you forgave yourself.
Absolutely. I think that we can be the most judgmental of ourselves, and that can be very damaging, and can prevent us from actually being the beings of light that we have the capacity to be. But I believe that doing work, helping others, is one of the most transformative practices that one can develop. And I think that in the work that I've done with survivors, I've seen time and time again that when people need to help others, or when they see others who are even worse off than themselves, and they recognize the power that they have to be that source of light, to be able to help someone else deal with what they are still struggling with themselves, so often that is such a catalyst for their own growth and well-being.
Yes.
It's a very beautiful process to see someone who's struggling themselves find the strength to help someone else, and in that process transform themselves and let go of the things that no longer serve them.
Indrani, I'm going to share a very powerful secret. At one time, some years ago, so I work with women, okay? around domestic abuse. I had this huge event, and the women and the men. My intention behind it was that the men would leave, not feeling like they were bad or wrong, or that men would leave empowered to empower other men. And that's exactly what happened. But while I was having this event, the person I was dating at the time, that I was going through the mental and emotional abuse, was sitting in the front row. And it was a duality of supporting me, because he was. No, he really was. Because see, everyone's not a victim. But it was a situation of me at the time, emotionally and mentally, not understanding where I was in that peg of which side I was on. And when I look back, I was like, well, was I living a lie? Okay? Because I was literally dealing with that person while I'm doing this event. I keep looking over, and I would say to the person at the time, I'm not with them now, but I would say to the person at the time, how can I be having an event like this? And actually, you're the person I'm going through the emotional and mental abuse with. It was and it took me a while to move from that, So I think our stories, just like you're illuminating this here, okay? And this is something now that I'm illuminating from what you're saying to me. Women in film. Have you ever done film, since you deal with ending gender violence, and we both have that in common in the work that we do? Have you ever shown women what happens through any of your films when they don't get to seek the help they need?
Yes, I think that I'm actually working on a film right now. It's in progress. It's a very tough story, and it's called Reunited, and it's a film in which we see the consequences of a woman that's denied the help she needs, actually by some of the laws at The Hague, which currently prevent or actually enforce that children that are taken by a woman who's escaping from domestic violence can be returned or forced to be returned to the fathers, because the Hague doesn't view domestic violence as a danger to the child. So if they don't go through all the correct procedures, those children are often taken away from them and returned to fathers who are convicted of violence. So yes, there are many entrenched laws and systems by which women are prevented sometimes from getting the help they need, and the results are very tragic. I also do a lot of work against trafficking, particularly sex trafficking and trafficking of children, and I see a lot of similarities in the problems between domestic violence and trafficking. There seems to be a real problem in the ability of societies to protect these women that are desperately in need of protection for a variety of reasons, but they tend to be very similar in the ways in which, whether it's the problems with policing or problems with the laws themselves, women are often actually, the policing systems can actually make things worse rather than make them better.
There was a woman that I met, okay? And it's the duality, I was sharing earlier. Women are complicated creatures. We are very much, and I love that you said that you could see the duality, or the composition or the comparison between what you said about domestic violence and human trafficking. I started doing some work in human trafficking, and I have to give you a lot of credit, because it's a deeper world, and it's a scarier world, because I'd love to ask you this question so that people would maybe know about this. In human trafficking, it's often been said, and this is something I've heard, I do not know it to be the truth, nor have I ever dealt or seen it. But there was a woman who told a story of, I have dealt with people when they come out of the human trafficking, but it's a deeper world. And it was one that I didn't want to deal with, and I have to be honest. And the woman said, Indrani, that she actually she was a child, and she was human trafficked by the very wealthy. And she said they did it for like adrenaline in children. And then they would take the needle, like a needle, and take, when a child is, I guess aroused or whatever at an early age, there's a level of adrenaline that they have in the body. And they would actually take a needle and, like when you draw blood, they would draw the adrenaline, which comes out as almost like a clear liquid, almost, from the child. I know it gives me the creeps too. And they use this adrenaline in older people to keep them to keep them younger. Have you ever, in your passings and the things that you've done, have you ever heard anything similar to that in the human trafficking area?
I have not. I have worked with a lot of survivors, and I've worked with a lot of nonprofits as well in that area. I work with Saving Jane, especially. I'm on their board, so we do hear all kinds of stories. I haven't heard that particular one, but I wouldn't be surprised. There's so many terrible things that happen. My focus has been more on prevention of trafficking, and then also helping the survivors to have rehabilitation, to re-enter society, and to get the protection that they need. So I haven't dealt as much with the aspect you just mentioned.
Well, I was surprised too. This was a survivor, and she was telling her story in a open forum. And she explained that many children are taken for that reason, not just for sexual or whatever, but also for different harvestings of things that their body will release that an older body will not. I found it interesting.
There's all of the organ trafficking as well that happens. So there are many terrible forms that trafficking can take. For me, the what I've been focused on is sex trafficking, and I actually feel that is it's so terrifying, the idea of being raped just once, and these young women and girls face that thousands of times over and over again. So for me, I can't imagine anything more terrible, and I really believe that everyone should take this epidemic of trafficking very seriously and do what they can in their own communities to fight it, because it is absolutely everywhere. It is in everyone's backyard, and everyone's kids are at risk. And so we all need to share those responsibilities. Even if they're children from another community, they're just as much our children.
Absolutely. I think often, Indrani, people don't realize that, and I don't know if you're you're calling in from India right now or somewhere else, but I do know that often, even here in the States, that couldn't happen to me. And in the communities here in Houston, over in Minneapolis, they were happening someplace upstate New York. There was a huge influx of people being grabbed for human trafficking. And
every city in America has trafficking, and even outside of the cities, it is also in the rural areas as well. So there is no place that is exempt. And so we each can have a huge impact by asking our local politicians and our police forces to take this seriously. And there is a lot that can be done. It's just that people don't want to believe that it happens. And I'm right now in New York, but I am from India. And when I was in India last, I was working on this short film called Girl Epidemic, which won CNN Expose Award and the Tribeca Film Festival Disruptive Innovation Award. And it was really interesting because I spoke with a lot of very educated judges, teachers, and police people while I was making that film in India, and they all said, "Oh, that doesn't happen here. That happens in in America, places like that, where there's less morality, and you come here and you hear the same thing, like, oh, that's over in India." So no one wants to accept the responsibility of looking after the kids in their own backyard. So it's very, very tragic, and that's why this problem exists, because no one wants to believe it.
Indrani, as someone who's in film and who's been to these various beautiful places around the world, but also has sometimes seen the worst of humanity, okay, as well as the best, have you ever been in a situation while filming that you had to look out for your own safety?
Yeah, I'm always putting myself into dangerous situations. It seems to be an occupational hazard, but I've been very fortunate. It's just luck, I think, that or some. I like to think that when I'm focused on doing things for the good of others, that somehow I'm protected. And that's been the case for me so far. But I know that is, that there's always a lot of risk, and especially in an area like fighting trafficking, there are a lot of very dangerous people whose livelihoods are at stake, and so they don't take it very
well.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you, how do you keep yourself grounded? You know what I mean? Because often when we help others, okay, we're taking sometimes on the energy of those other people. And just so people understand what I'm asking, Indrani, often when you are engaging with someone else, you will find that you are taking on their projections of life sometimes, because you're stepping into their world for a moment in order to reach them. So my question to you is, Indrani, have you ever felt yourself like you're grounded, but you had to be careful not to support the person, but not get caught up in their own story to the point that because you can become a victim too, being caught up in someone else's story.
Absolutely, and I think we face those dangers in every aspect of life. It's not just as filmmakers. I think that one can have that challenge in one's family or in one's love life. I think we have to.
Sure.
Yeah. I think it's a very important part of being able to help others, is also being able to not get too enmeshed or not become part of the problem, but rather part of the solution. And so for me, it's always about helping people to help themselves. I think that is, when you get too close in a certain way, or you think that you know better what's good for someone else, that's where I think all kinds of problems arise. And I think it's really important to respect each individual's journey and their own process of healing and overcoming, and to understand that it doesn't happen at the pace that you might want it to happen at, but just providing positivity and a certain objectivity and love at the same time. There's a delicate balance to be had between those that I think is the most useful. I'm also teaching a class at Princeton. I'm a visiting lecturer at Princeton right now, and so I have the wonderful experience of having students who are really passionate about social justice and human rights, and so it's part of being able to, just like with students, you want to provide guidance, but you also have to let them figure stuff out on their own, and so I think it's often a similar process for helping people overcome trauma or all kinds of different issues, giving them the tools, but then also giving them the space to figure things out on their own.
I have they're going to kill me for going over, but I'm so enjoying this conversation with you, so I better hurry so we can bring other people on. But Indrani, I wanted to read something to you, and then I want you to share from your spirit how this is for you. Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
Lotus is the only flower that teaches us where we reach is important, not where we come from. And the answer to that one is enjoy every moment of life. Don't save it. There's no system to get a refund on an unused life. The next one is you can never fake your growth. Your triggers will always expose you. The answer to that one is you will keep repeating the same cycles over and over again until you accept complete responsibility for your life. Your life will keep sending you experiences designed to get your attention. Don't let the learning from your own mistakes take too long. The answer to that one is if you take too long to discover the lessons from a mistake, you will meet that problem again and again until you get the message. If you've been doing it wrong for the last 10 years, that is too high a price to pay. The last part is Indrani. If you'll not free yourself from the chain that binds you, you will mismanage every door that is open for you. If you've been successful in being able to discover it, remain consistent with it and keep yourself updated about the nitty gritty of it. You're a success. Be the best of your true vision like a lotus.
That's very beautiful. I love that. It's a wonderful poem.
So it's not even a poem, it's just words and then answers to it. I'd love to find out your take on that through the work that you do.
Well, I think that the lotus metaphor is a wonderful one. And being from India, it's something that is very much part of my culture. And this idea of the lotus growing through the mud, it grows through layers and layers of mud and sludge and all the stuff at the bottom of the lake. But that's where it draws its strength and it bursts through to above the surface of the water. And so I think that being grounded and allowing for the messiness of life, being at peace with the chaos is really critical to our growth and recognizing that there's chaos in everyone, including ourselves, and that's okay. It's not something that we need to fight, but it is something that can be a wonderful fertile ground for a blossoming, and just focusing on the purity of that vision and the purity of a goal that is beyond yourself, a goal that is a higher aspiration for others, I think is really a wonderful way to live one's life and to be able to live the most fullest and most rewarding life that one can have.
Well, to close this out, what words do you want to leave with the world, Indrani?
I believe that women are so incredibly powerful, and I include in that the LGBTQ community, people of all genders, and I believe that there are messages that so many women have left us through mythology, through the stories that have been passed down, and I think that it is in all of our interests to learn from those women of the past and women from all over the world, from all backgrounds, who have each explored and fine-tuned the ways in which to overcome challenges and to make a better world around them. And I think that we all need to seek out those stories, to represent them in films and media, and to share all of the possibilities of the mothers, the millions of mothers that come before us.
That was absolutely beautiful. It was such a pleasure to talk with you. And I must say, I've heard this saying before, but I don't think I've ever used it. You are a ray of sunshine. So it's no surprise that the sunshine was coming over you.
Oh, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to speak with you, Gail. You're very inspiring, and I loved all that you shared. Thank you for sharing that with me and for having me on this wonderful conference.
Yeah, the more we talk to people, the more I think we're grateful to all of you that have come on and shared your time. I opened my day today and I said it would just be a day of learning. Like, I don't know anything. And I think as adults, we have to get back to being like children in that way. We don't know anything. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It was a delight.
Bye bye. And just stay with us in